ask Judge Ortiz, who was so critical in getting this panel together, to say a few words and maybe help with some of the general introductions.
Sure. Thanks, Victor. This panel is sort of the brainchild of the YLD and the judicial section and the corporate counsel section. We sort of got together and thought these topics we get a lot of training in the judicial section about diversity and implicit bias, and Ryan Boggs at Dominion Energy said that DEI has become a focus point for them, and we thought, well, we should share it with the VBA. And so we came together and put together this very talented panel, and it should be a very exciting conversation. And so I will go ahead and introduce everyone, and then sit down and turn off my video and let Victor take over. So beginning, we have KarenMichael, who is the president of KarenMichael PLC, a work law investigations, training and HR consulting firm founded back in 2008. She's the author of Stay Hired, an essential guide for those entering the workforce on how to successfully go to work. She's been an employment lawyer for some time. She began her career working in big law, and she's been a human resource officer at SunTrust Bank. She's taught at University of Richmond, and she is well-versed on our topic today. Next, I have Rick Holzheimer, who is a partner at the Tyson's Corner office of McGuire Woods. He does commercial litigation. He specializes in a variety of different practice areas. He is a graduate of Notre Dame Law School. I know he clerked in the Fairfax County Circuit Court many, many moons ago for Judge McQueenie. He is an active member of our community. Specifically, he's the president, or I think he might now be the past president, do correct me if I'm wrong, of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of Virginia. He served on a variety of different organizations, including Leadership Fairfax, incorporated up here in Northern Virginia. And we're glad to have Rick. As Richard mentioned earlier, Victor Cardwell is going to be our moderator. He is known to everyone in this panel, as well as everyone watching. He is the co-chair of Wood Rogers Labor and Employment Law Section. He is chairman of the Wood Rogers Board of Directors. He is, for the next hour and a half or so, perhaps the president-elect of the Board of Governors of the VBA, and soon to be installed as our next president. And then finally, we have Judge Flythe of Newport News. She was appointed to the Newport News Circuit Court back in April of 2001, previously serving on the General District Court from 2015 up into her recent appointment. She is an adjunct professor at the Colin of William Mary Law School. Before she became a judge, she served as a deputy Commonwealth attorney in Newport News and an assistant public defender in Portsmouth, and is widely regarded as a rising star in the judiciary. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to Victor. And I will say this, I know that all the panel members welcome questions, and we want to see them in the question and answer tab, as well as the chat. Wherever we can get the questions, we'll take them. And so please feel free to join this conversation. It should be very interesting. And there you go, Victor, off to the races.
Judge Ortiz, thank you so very much.
Oh, one last thing. I do want to thank, my clerks and interns, specifically Mary Horn, who helped prepare and do a lot of the research into the PowerPoint slide, which are the written materials. We may not use a lot of them today, but I commend them to you. And I do want to thank my clerks for putting a lot of that information together. It's very interesting. And please join me in welcoming Victor. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Ortiz. A couple of things I should say first. Judge Ortiz has been the hardest working man in show business. James Brown has relented his title. And in case you don't know, I mean, Judge Ortiz has been amazing with the VBA and serving in so many different roles. And he has presided over two and even this session. So we thank you for your tireless efforts, Judge Ortiz. And yeah, your law clerks created an amazing PowerPoint that I would recommend to any and everybody who's watching. A couple of housekeeping matters. We really don't have any. When you ask questions, you understand that we're going to get an answer. And we may not always agree on those answers, but we're going to talk about this issue. You know, the funny thing is I've got a panel of distinguished lawyers here and judge. And you know, when I see a title that says what the legal industry gets wrong, I'm flabbergasted. We're lawyers. We don't get stuff wrong. We may not be 100% right, but we certainly don't get things wrong. But do we? So it's a great topic. What I'll do very quickly, and Rick, I'll ask you to make sure I'm right. Are you current president of the Asian Pacific Bar, or did that just expire?
It just expired. We have 2 years terms, and as of this year, I am now the past president for the next 2 years.
I'm not going to foreshadow too much, but I'm tapping on those connections and experiences pretty quickly. Listen, we've got a great panel here, but I'm hoping, and I would love to people respond in the chat to this, and you can respond from the moment. And I should have told my panelists I was going to ask this question. And you can't answer anonymously, but I promise you your answer won't be used against you. And I may even give the first answer. And I hope Karen and Rick and Judge Flythe appreciate this question. But my question to the attendees, and I would like for you to chime in here, is how many of you, or how many of your law firms have had just basic harassment training over the past year? How many of your law firms have had, and I'm talking about for the lawyers or staff, but how many? And at the risk of upsetting some people, I'm answering for me. It's a work in progress. Okay. So with that, I do want you to chime in and answer. I see one of my partners already threw us up under the bus, but I want to start off with Karen. And Karen, what I'm going to ask you about is, what the heck is DEI, and how do we get there? And why does my question about harassment matter?
Well, thank you. And I'm just loving on this panel with such distinguished people. So I think that your question is so relevant, because we're not even getting the low-hanging fruit right, let alone the whole picture of DEI. And I just am astounded at how this is kind of basic stuff that all these years, I've been doing this almost 3 decades, and and when I started in my law firm, there was just a huge sexual harassment issue within the firm, not to me, but just in the firm. And yet decades later, what have we really done to address just setting expectations around basic harassment, discrimination, respect in the workplace? I mean, that's the starting point. But with DEI in particular, what I find a little upsetting is that it's gotten a bad rap. Just the whole term has become very divisive and negative, and it's like it's us against them, and it's, you got to take it. It's like it's a pill you got to swallow, and it's going to be awful and terrible, and it's going to be disruptive, and I just think DEI that's not what DEI is. We need to bring back to organizations the excitement around change and inclusion and what that really brings to organizations. And what I want people to understand is that your organization might have an awesome program. You might have an amazing DEI professional that works there. That's all great, but DEI is local. And what I challenge every person on this call to do is to ask yourself, what have I done lately? Managers or lawyers are notoriously horrible managers, but that's your job if you're a leader. And one of your jobs is with the people that are within your span of control. I don't care what the Joneses are doing. I don't care what the guy next door to you is doing. What are you doing personally to develop your people individually, meeting them where they are? What are their needs? How are you going to expose them to opportunities? What are you doing local? And I challenge everyone on this call to just focus on themselves, be super selfish, forget everything else, what are you doing to train and develop your people? And oh, by the way, right now, if you think you're going to have an opening, you should be on LinkedIn linking into every single lawyer in the industry you can imagine. So when you have an opening, you own your recruit. Stop looking to your HR department to recruit your people. You own your recruit. You own that diverse talent. You need to make sure that you develop people in a way that they can be seen in the organization, promoted in the organization. That's DEI. It's not this program in a book somewhere. It's you're DEI. And that's what I want to challenge people to do.
In case you guys who are in attendance or watching us didn't know, I knew that my primary job was reining that tiger back in, no question about it. Karen, that's outstanding. Thank you. Judge Flythe, I'll ask you, I want to break this down a little bit more though, because everybody uses the phrase. I hear DEI now. I hear DEI now as much as I heard, I'm not even sure what phrase I can toss out there, liberal or conservative, or you name it. It's a phrase. What's DEI mean to you, Yana?
I think that DEI is tossed all over the place, but for the most part, we hear diversity and inclusion. The equity has come later. And just at the bare bones, it's about making sure that there's a reflection in the room of what the community looks like outside of the room, right? Can we create a space in our workplaces, in the legal field, in the courtroom, in the law enforcement community that reflects the space outside of that room? The people who are making the choices look like and can speak to the needs of people that look like them, live like them, have history like them, or have a background like them. The equity part, which is newer for a lot of people, is something that we in the legal profession are all very familiar with. We're all familiar with this idea of equity. Sometimes it's about one side winning, sometimes it's about another side winning. But at its heart, when we talk about making people whole or trying to create balance, this is the space that we come from. This is the profession that we represent, and we stand on the benefits of equality. So how do I make sure that I bring equity? And what that means at its heart, I think, is to learn that fairness doesn't always mean exactly the same. Equity sometimes means different things for different people because someone has a different need. There are people that come to us, and now I'm on the side of what I like to call the community service of it. You know, clerks, we are community servants. We are serving the community, and when you're in the court, even, especially when it comes to the public and even to the attorneys that appear in front of you, you're really there to provide the service of making sure that justice can be honored and that it can be something that's going to work for the people who are in the room, attorney all the way to the public. So I think that making sure that you understand that there are different needs for everyone that comes in. It doesn't mean that everyone gets treated exactly the same. I'm going to give you a pinch. There are some people that are going to come into the courtroom and they might need a little bit more. You have pro se folks that come in. Just to give you an example, when someone comes in and they're not represented, I'm going to take a little bit more time with them. I am not going to necessarily spoon feed them, but there are going to be things that they might not know. Not going over my boundaries, but also recognizing that person today needs something different than the person who's represented by someone else. And that's just what I mean. Just making sure that we pay attention to that. And then inclusion means not just having people in the room, but making sure we listen to the voices that are actually there as well. Because the room can reflect on its face what is outside of the room. But if we're not making sure that we take the time to listen to those voices and value what they bring to the table, then we're missing that part of it.
Excellent. Rick, I'm going to ask you to give me this big firm perspective on what does DEI mean to the group, and again, it's your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. And then Karen, we're gonna go back down some of the paths that she tried on, but how does a firm begin to address these issues of DEI? Judge Flythe, can address this in her courtroom because she controls it. But what about you? What about me? What about those of us who are in these firms with partners?
Sure. I think, from a big firm perspective, I think, the issues are the same, whether it's a big firm, whether it's a courtroom, whether it's a small firm, or even a business. It is all about DEI, diversity, inclusion, and it really is kind of, addressing that issues. So, in some ways, I think a big firm is not any different. I think what a big firm can do, you can get into, and when you start saying, well, let's see how many people we've promoted. I mean, a big firm can have large enough numbers. You can see, oh, well, what percentage are people being promoted? How many numbers? Where at a smaller firm or a smaller business, it's more personalized. But so I think there's some metrics that can come in, and I say that as an advantage for a big firm. But I think the core issues are exactly the same, no matter where you are. And so there's some advantages, and I think unfortunately some disadvantages from a big firm. So for diversity at a big firm, when you're at a smaller firm, you can address it. You can sit down and you can talk to every single person. You can have the conversation with all the partners, and the partners can have the conversations with the associates as to how important it is. At a big firm, it's harder. You can message, you can have managers, you can do things, but it is hard to have that one-on-one conversation, which frankly, I think is an important part of the next step in diversity and inclusion, is kind of the individualized, addressing the issues that individual people are having. Because let's be clear, not everybody is the same, even within the various affinity groups. African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, it's like, oh, well, everyone's kind of a minority, but maybe within those groups, African Americans have different experiences than Asians. Well, yes, but within the African American community, within the Asian community, within the Hispanic community, there's actually a lot of differences within them. Whether you are a 5th generation Japanese American who's been, a farmer for generations versus somebody who, is a Vietnamese person who came across in a boat in the 80s. Even within our communities, there's a lot of diversity. So what DEI means at a big firm is kind of addressing it, but it is really the same issue that we're all facing. And even within our communities, are some people within the Asian community, are there hierarchies or stereotypes within that? And same with other communities as well. So I think big firms do things different. But one thing across the board, again, I really do think it's the same issue is what are you doing? Who's being promoted? Like, I work at McGuire Woods, it's a work in progress. There's a lot of positives and there's a lot of things we need to work on. But one of the most positive things I can see at the firm is that our chairman, John Harmon, is an African American. And he is not the chairman because he's an African American. He is an amazing chairman and he's African American. And I think that sends a message down the line. I knew John Harmon, before he became our chairman. And you meet him and you're like, that is a special individual. And when his name came up as he's going to be the chairman, I was like, makes total sense, 100%. I don't think there was any dissent. But it sends a message. Is him being African American a positive? Absolutely. Is it why he made it? No, he's an amazing individual. But the added benefits of having the chairman of our firm be African American, it sends a message. Yes, we have a lot of work to do, but it sends a message. And I do think that's how DEI or diversity in the big firms, that's kind of our take.
Okay, I'm going to do this real quickly because I'm a firm believer that I like to start from ground zero. We've got about 75 or so of our closest friends on this Zoom link, and I'm going to share a definition of diversity because I'm a firm believer that you have a hard time having this conversation. So I appreciate Judge Flythe and her effort to talk about equity and inclusion. But I'm going to use a different definition, and I'd like to take credit for it, but I can't. There was a speaker, he died about 10 years ago. His name was Roosevelt Thomas, Dr. Roosevelt Thomas out of Morehouse University. And Dr. Thomas had a definition of diversity, which I will commend to anybody who will listen. And I'll ask you guys, if it's pot shots a way to improve it, I want you to give those. But I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Dr. Thomas's definition of diversity was the collective mixture of differences and similarities wherever you might find them. The collective mixture of differences and similarities wherever you might find them. That's a great definition for diversity, in my humble opinion. Now we talk about issues of equality and inclusion. But Karen, I'll ask you a couple of things. If one, is that definition a pretty decent definition, or how do we improve it in 2022? You see, I'm still stuck in a time warp. So that's the first question. And the second question is, not everybody believes in this stuff. I mean, isn't that a reality that we have to face too? That as good as DEI is, that we could face partners of ours, I'm talking about lawyers, who struggle still with some of these ideas and concepts. Perhaps, and I'd like to say they're, quote, aging out. That's not true. We have people who just raised differently. What about when you encounter that? So first, my definition, Karen, what do you think about that? And then how do we go next?
Well, I think that we spend too much effort trying to define things and make it a very almost theoretical issue, when really what diversity is just people. And every single person in your organization right now has diversity. Whether they're all white males, they have diversity.
Absolutely.
So the question I think we should focus on is, why isn't there more representation of a variety of people in an organization? And I think the reason is because the reality is there has always been this little ball of power. And it's not a ding against white men, but if you're a young, attractive, educated Caucasian male who's heterosexual, English speaking and educated, you own the power. You have forever. And when you're thinking about that as a lawyer, and you're interviewing people and you've got people in your organization, able-bodied as well is within the power. This person has a disability. This person, you've added a barrier. This person has a different race, either Asian or Black or what, that's a barrier. This person's a female, that's a barrier. Well, you get a disabled Black female, you've got 3 barriers that have been put on that person, potentially, historically. And so I'd like to more focus on where do barriers exist? I do this training, I did it for the EOC, it was called I Don't See Color. And it's now you get these people that love to say, and I get it after my training all the time, people will come up and be like, I don't see color. I mean, that's my problem. I don't even notice color. And I'm like, yes, you do. Close your eyes. What is the race and gender of the presenter today?
Okay, let me pause you. I want to pause you. I don't want to stop you. I want to pause you. So pause you. Judge Flythe, you've got to respond to that. I don't see color because I saw your reaction.
Well, I will just say that I think that, you know, for a Black woman, race and gender is something that I have had with me at all times. It has always been there. It's not something that I can separate myself from at all as far as what someone sees when they see me. And I want people to actually see who I am, all of it, and accept everything that I am, all of it. So I think that lots of people are very well-meaning when they say, I don't see color. I know that the heart of it is that they're trying to say that I don't see this thing that is negative. And I think that that's where the narrative has to begin, because when you say you don't see it, or when people say that they don't see it, and again, very well-meaning, it is because in their mind, it represents something that's negative. And that is, I think that's something that is a place for us to start conversation. And I think that shying away from it a lot of times, or putting it under something is where we mess up, that we don't take the time to embrace getting to know this person who has a different background than you, that looks different from you, or loves differently from you, and embracing who that is and bringing them in and being, having that share, that interchanging of ideas and that interchanging of culture. And I think we miss out when we don't see the differences so that we can embrace them.
That's why I love this panel, because I'm about to hit play back on Karen, because I knew Karen could pick up exactly where you were, Judge Flythe. And I think that this panel is going to be the one that addresses all of those questions and concerns for as much time as we have. And then we will resolve the world's problems after we finish. Karen, I cut you off because you hit right on the place I wanted to go.
And I love Judge Flythe's response. That response is exactly right. And that's been the response to people who say, I don't see color. It's like, that's who I am. And for all of these things, whether it's somebody who's disabled or whatever our identity is. But on this, what I want people to know is you're free to be able to see what there is to be seen. I think that we're so worried about, science tells us that we immediately go somewhere with people. We assess them immediately. We assess their age, their ability, their education, their job. We judge people immediately. Science tells us that. It is what it is. You can't stop it. It goes there automatically. And no matter how hard you try, now you can change over time. Our brains are malleable, but we have a whole lifetime of experience. I mean, I use the example is for years, I was asked to write policies saying, no tattoos, you can't see tattoos. Well, I'm an animal rights, activist isn't even the right word. And if you do this kind of work and you follow the dodo on Instagram where they have all these rescues, 99% of people that do that, frankly, are have tons of tattoos. And over time, my mind has really changed about that, but it doesn't mean I don't see the tattoos. I just think differently about that now because my life experience has changed. And so our brain is malleable. The question isn't, do you see it? It's what you do with that information, how you act upon it, and what you speak about it. And those are the things that I want people to, that's what you can change. You can't change where your brain goes, but you can change your actions and you can change your words. And so that's where I want people to refocus themselves. Not that you don't see it, it's what do I do with that information? And exactly what Judge Flythe said, it's not a negative. These are exciting, positive times. Inclusion is a great thing. And on the difference between diversity and inclusion, I don't know if Stephanie Card is on here, but she and her husband and had my husband and I over for dinner. And I know they're not vegetarians, but they invited us over. I'm a crazy vegetarian, and they invited us over. That's diversity. But when she served the black bean enchiladas, that was inclusion. I had a sense of belonging there because she made sure to serve a meal that she knew I could enjoy. And so that's what we need to think about when we're expanding our workforce. It's a sense of belonging, because you know what? We want people to feel welcome and a sense of belonging and valued, because if they don't, they're not going to stay there. So you're fighting for a war on talent, and you need to make sure that you're doing the things that make people feel that they're included and promoted within the organization and meeting them where they are.
This question is not, well, I'm gonna ask it just the way. Black bean enchiladas sound delicious to me. However, I would like some steak strips in my black bean enchiladas. Is it okay to be inclusive and have my steak strips on my black bean enchilada? Well, I'll give you your black bean enchilada without touching the meat.
Well, that's the thing. It stopped being so judgy. I had no problem with everybody else eating meat, but my meal didn't have meat in it. And then that's a beautiful thing about being inclusive. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, or you're not going to, but you're going to make sure that everyone can enjoy the meal. And that's how we need to look at our workplace.
And listen, I like that analogy. And Rick, go ahead, because I was going to ask you, how do you do that? Listen, we lawyers are notorious for one thing. When things work, we like it. We know what law schools were great. I mean, every one of our firms, our histories are tied to some one of these probably law schools in Commonwealth of Virginia, name UVA, name Richmond, name WNL, wherever, and then they start to whittle down to other law schools. How do you have that inclusivity at the big firm?
Well, and before I get to that, I do want to touch on I don't see color or something like that. And,
yes.
and I thought Karen had a great answer on that. But because at the end of the day, we lawyers, especially, we are seeing, we gather information. I was thinking, again, these slides are amazing from Judge Ortiz's clerks. It talks about, like, when we do jury selection, I want to know where people live, what they do, are they married, do they own property? We gather all this information. And I think, but on diversity issues, is somebody's color, is somebody's background, is somebody's ethnicity, or are they Muslim? Is this information? Yes, but it shouldn't override everything else. This person is an African-American, and that overrides their education, it overrides, their jobs, and it overrides all these other things. They're married and have wonderful kids and are a pastor in their church, but they're Black. And the issue that's being addressed is people are using some small categories and using it to override any other information. That's all I need to know. I just need to see this one sliver of information, and I'm going to override a lot of other things, or I'm not going to care about a lot of other things. And to me, that's what diversity is focusing on. It is you don't want people to say, I don't see color, because I don't think that's a realistic, for all the reasons said, that's a realistic kind of reality. But it's okay, but what does it mean? And okay, is it just as important as how old they are, where they live, how long where did they grow up? Did they grow up in Oklahoma? Did they grow up in Virginia? So it's not about saying people need to be colorblind. It's about saying certain factors shouldn't just override everything else.
Okay, I like that. That sounds like basically accept me for who I am, and I get that. But we recognize that we do have, I hate to throw out phrases and terms, but we all have our implicit biases. We have them. And again, I'm going to say this, in a profession where tried and true has been tested forever. I studied for the bar. How did I study for the bar? I took a bar B class. That's the only thing everybody else did, right? When those tried and true things are being tested or being bent, how do you affect that change? And Karen, I want you to touch on that first. And then Judge Flythe, I'll ask you about how you've seen the court change in that regard. And I want you to be thinking about this as I come to you. We are living in a time now where law enforcement, our judicial system as a whole, in some ways is under attack. It's under attack because people don't trust it. It's under attack because, frankly, we have leaders who say, no, that's not the right decision, that's wrong. And I wanted you to chat about that. But Karen, tell me real quickly about these implicit biases and how do you train those away?
We'll go back to everything is local. Remember, we're talking about me. Like, what am I doing? So when I started at my firm, McGuire Woods, years ago, they were lovely. It was a wonderful experience. They said to me, Karen, we're giving you this woman lawyer mentor down the hall who works 3 days a week. She's going to be your mentor. Well, I don't want her. she's lovely, but I'm not on the mommy track. It turns out I was on the mommy track, but I swore I wasn't. And, you know, I want the senior Rosie Page who Charlie Meyer is getting. Why am I getting the lawyer down here who doesn't have any power in the firm? And there was a really interesting study done by the Center for Work-Life Law Analysis, and they looked at performance reviews that law firms did on their associates and lawyers. And all of these biases that we have about people were directly put into these performance reviews, that women reviewed as the caregivers, men reviewed as authoritative. Black employees, for example, it was consistently said that they have a good attitude over white, as though we have this stereotype that Black men have a bad attitude. So we feel the need to put in the performance review that they have a good attitude, whereas white men didn't have in their performance review that they had a good attitude. So it's focusing on your own knowledge of your own bias. The best thing we can do in life is to admit our own bias. We don't have to admit it out loud, but understand and recognize where those fears are, where those concerns are, because we're being selfish and we're thinking, like I said about the tattoos, I recognize that in myself, that I had a negative reaction to people with tattoos until over time that changed.
Well, mine hadn't changed yet. Let me be very clear about this. My children know, and you may meet one of them a little bit later, I wish you could meet both, that daddy can't stop tattoos because I know everybody got one. But if they come below your cuffs or above your neckline, you better be a boxer or a rapper. So let's be very clear about that. Let me say, well, there was one of the comments you made that was serious, and I want to address it too. It's interesting that you see evaluations where the Black male, for example, has a quote, good attitude. Having woke up as a Black male and went to bed as one for 60 years, whatever number it is, you know, I can tell you that, yeah, you do fight a stereotype when you walk in the door. And you do make sure and again, I want to make sure people who don't know me hear me loud and clear. I don't mean you're stepping fetching. That's a really, really bad phrase. But you do walk in and make sure you smile and say, hey, how you doing? When you walk into this majority firm or wherever it is. Because if you sometimes act like you feel, you're like, oh, no, dude, don't bother me right now. And so I'm not speaking for all Black men. I'm not, but I know there is an era and a time when you had to fight what you knew was going to be a bias against you that was presupposed. And I'm old enough on this panel to talk about that. And so you hear more Black people who are, quote, very articulate. And then you see an evaluation, he speaks well. And I'm like, yeah, dude, while my dad finished the 10th grade, my mama finished high school, education was important in the Cardwell household. So those are real things that people have confronted. And I saw Judge Flythe actually react a little bit when I talked about that. Judge?
So I know that you want me to talk about the next question.
No, you better get on this one first.
The system being under attack. No, I think that that's just very real. And I can only speak from the community that I come from, but I imagine that it's probably similar in just about every race or ethnic background, or even a sexual orientation or gender identification as well. You walk into a room or you're seated somewhere and you're reminded very quickly that I might not be able to react the way that I feel today, or I might not be able to say the thing that I want to say today because I don't want to be viewed as angry, or I don't want to be viewed as disagreeable, or I have an attitude.
You mean there's a stereotype of an angry Black woman? Is that what you're telling me?
I tell you, isn't it amazing?
Just like, I know we're not supposed to talk about this in general public, but we're gonna do this right now.
No, I mean, but that's the truth. Having an attitude or being angry, and having to somehow justify that whatever your mood is has something to do with the color that I am, or that I'm apparently going to do something to you, or I'm going to get all up in your face and cause you to be uncomfortable, makes you have this, I'm going to call it a low-grade fever of having to be uncomfortable sometimes in spaces because you don't want to have the dialogue afterwards.
And when you can't be your authentic self, Judge, when you cannot be your authentic self, how does that promote your sense of belonging? And you can imagine in a majority organization, people automatically feel a sense of belonging because they relate easier. And so when you walk in and you don't feel that sense of being able to be your authentic self, you're already not feeling a sense of belonging and inclusion. I mean, so that's so spot on of the reality. I will also say it's a challenge for organizations now when you do have a woman who is Black, who is horrible. I had a woman, she wrote in her pen, cutting through the paper, trigger, when they tried to give her a performance review, and cut it with, her pen, and then said, well, you're just calling me an angry Black woman, when they tried to fire her. And so they're, it's like, everyone's trying to work this through, but I love what you said, because we want people to be their authentic selves. That's who they are. And we want people to be themselves. And you hear from you and from Victor, like, you've got to just kind of change to meet.
And what I would suggest is, it's not that you have to change, but you have to recognize where you are.
Right.
Like, have you found a similar thing in either at your firm or from even when as from a past president of the Asia Pacific Bar, where people say they have to sort of recognize the room you're in? Because the first thing you have to do, you mentioned your firm's chairman, executive director, you have to get that credibility when you walk in the door. It's not oftentimes just given to you, Karen. And I think, unlike that white male who's 25 and just finished UVA top 5%, whatever it is. Rick, I mean, what have you seen, or does this resonate with you?
It absolutely resonates. And I think, again, I think there's different variations of this through groups and subgroups and many groups, but I've seen it directly with people I know. I've seen it and I've lived it, and I've felt it too, but it's a little different. For example, I have a good friend, she's Asian American, she's a litigator, and she was an associate, and she interviewed somewhere, and I followed up with the person, and I was like, oh, how did it go? I was kind of excited. I really thought it would go well. And he was, oh, I liked her. She was great. She was really smart, but I just don't think she's a litigator. I just didn't see her being aggressive enough. And she, and that's the stereotype for an Asian woman. And I was like, did you not interview her? She is a pit bull. And by the way, she went elsewhere. She made partner, and she's an amazing lawyer. And, you fear her when you see in the courtroom. She is tough, but the fact that he interviewed her and his takeaway was, she's bright, she's smart, she's good, but I just don't see her as a litigator. She's not aggressive, and I've seen that, and I have the people are trying to figure me out. They're like, Holzheimer, what is that? And and then they'll meet
I wanted to ask Rick, but I was going to wait till we got in front of 80 of our closest friends. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're like, what's Holzheimer, and then people, Asians kind of get the forever foreigner thing. They're always like, and I would get it, and my friends get it, like, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Virginia. Oh, well, where's your family from? Oh, my dad's from Minnesota. They're like, where are you really from? And I know what the question is, and I try to stop myself from getting angry and saying, I know what they're asking for, and I'm like, oh no, I'm from Virginia. Well, I was born in Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, but because it's what they're getting to, and frankly, it causes a lot of pain, because it's you're an Asian, you're always a foreigner no matter how long you've been here, and there's a lot of stereotypes. I've got Asian friends who grow up in a classic American household. You couldn't tell the difference between them and anybody else, because they're just like everybody else, but they get questioned as if they're, oh, well, how is it in your household, or how do you celebrate the holidays and things like that? And it's like, yeah, I have Christmas, we have Santa Claus, we have cookies, and it's something that so I've seen it in the Asian community, and this is the beauty of diversity and inclusion is, you don't need to focus on this. You don't need to focus on, okay, well, there's the angry Black female, there's the passive Asian female. You don't need to do that. The purpose of diversity is being cognizant and not, again, putting too much weight on one tiny little factor. Yes, do we need to know how old they are? Do we need to know where they went to law school and what their resume says? Yes, but don't let the color of their skin just trump everything else. And that, I think, is the purpose of diversity. And I think that's at the core what is good to get away, what we get out of it. It isn't that I need to do this or that. It's just be aware of what we bring to the table, and be aware that we don't want to judge people without actually talking to them and or you can talk to them, but letting our biases filter their questions. I know this again, Asian female, she's an amazing litigator, and I know she answered the questions well, but clearly whatever answer she was getting was being filtered through, oh, she's a passive Asian woman.
Karen, how do we start? It's easy for us to have this conversation, and I think the 80 plus friends of ours who are on here get what Rick just said. But the problem is I got this other person who wants to ask him that question. So how do you ask the question, or how do we start moving this ball forward? Because I mean, I think I like Rick's theme of, getting past the individual and looking at me. I like the themes we have going here. What do we do next?
Well, I think one of the problems is people don't even know where to start with a conversation. When I do training on harassment or civility in the workplace, and I get to the point where I talk about Black hair and women's hair, numerous women will chat me privately and say, you do not know how many times people will touch my hair. And you could argue that they're
Karen, I hate stopping you all the time, but you hit on such good points. As a person who makes a decision because my hair is gray, but having known enough Black women in my life, yeah, you about to get a fight when you say, can I touch your hair? No, my last name is not Poodle. Judge Flythe, if I'm wrong about that, you can chime in, but I want Karen to keep finishing. Go ahead,
Karen. Nobody touches Judge Flythe's hair because she's a judge, and it's a matter of respect. But when you were younger, I just hear more often it's almost shocking how many people say that. And so what I think is, I suspect that the person's just trying to strike a conversation and not starting it like in a negative, or maybe with Rick, they're trying to start a conversation and not really know where to start. And so we know that in the back of their mind, they're thinking, oh, this Asian person, I wonder where he must be from, somewhere in Asia, or so, that's where their brain went. And we can't stop that from going there. You look at Harvard, when they had their case where they were not admitting, there was an allegation that they were not admitting Asians at a proportionate rate to their qualifications. And Harvard argued that Asians scored low on the leadership scale, consistently low on the leadership scale. So this concept of bias and unconscious bias, it starts so early. We have it right away. And if people would just step back and realize and Rick, I think, said, don't judge people. Science tells us that we judge people. So we can't stop that. You're going to judge. Every one of us is judging everybody all the time. That's the reality. The question is what we do with that information. And that's the work. That's the challenge. And that's where, when we have good, open dialogue with remember, we're in our span of control. We're trying to at least start there, being selfish, developing a positive relationship with our associates, meeting them where they are, finding out what drives them. I did this training recently, and this CFO said to me, Karen, you had that discussion on unconscious bias, and I've been denying this woman that reports to me a promotion because it required travel, and I knew she had 2 young children, and I didn't want her to feel guilty not taking this job. But your discussion reminds me, it's not up to me to make that decision. If she wants that promotion and wants to travel, that might not have been my decision, but I am clearly projecting what I would want onto this individual. And I see it all the time. Well, I didn't offer this opportunity for Susie Smith to go to training in Las Vegas because I knew she had young kids and probably wouldn't want to travel. It's that being able to just have that open dialogue, find people what they're interested in, meet them where they are, get the sense of belonging. Frankly, it's just not that complicated. We make it more complicated by putting a definition. And I just think that some of this DEI training is so complicated. You can see where people just give up. And it needs to be, we need to redirect our conversation around it to say, you are going to judge people. It's what you do with that information. It's how you treat people. It's how you act. It's what you say. It's what your plan is for each individual. Meeting people where they are, recognizing them as individuals. That's the game plan. And frankly, I just don't think it's that complicated.
I don't disagree with you, it's that complicated. Yana, tell me why it is, if it's not that complicated, it's so damn hard to get right. I mean, why do we have these questions happening in the courtroom? Why do we have these views of our police departments and law enforcement? And I can speak to some of that too. I mean, I deal with it, but I definitely want to get, you're seeing it firsthand.
So one of the things that I'll say is that to those that are watching, our 82 very close friends right now, I appreciate all of the messages that are going through in the chats and people kind of encouraging the conversation and joining in the conversation. When we talk about why is it so hard for us to talk about it, and then, you know, I hear what Karen's saying. Sometimes, as I said earlier, sometimes conversations are very well-meaning and the questions are about, I don't know how to break the ice any other way. But sometimes it's not like that. And I say that because communication is about what is communicated, and it's also about what is received on the other end. And there are questions that get asked, and you may feel like it's the most innocent thing in the world, but if it can cause hurt on the other side. And most of the time, if I'm faced with something that might be, it might be stereotypical, it may be, in my opinion, something that is inappropriate, or someone said in the chat, it just crosses boundaries. You know, what do we walk up to everyone and say, oh, you know, going back to what Rick said, where are you from? No, really, where are you from? Like, what did your 23andMe say? You know, are you kidding? That's not the kind of conversation or icebreaker that we're having. So why are you feeling comfortable with having it with somebody just because from the outside, you feel like there's more there, but you might not be able to distinguish all of the different European aspects or different European places that somebody might be from. So I think that getting back to what I was going to say, having the conversation is an important thing to do. Sometimes it's challenging and you don't necessarily feel like it because that person's made up their mind and nothing I say is going to change it. I don't have to deal with them ever again after this conversation. So I'm not going to help them be better about things. And sometimes you need to actually address it. One of the things that happened early for me in court when I was in general district court is because we rotated, so we were in traffic court. And in traffic court, lots of times, because of the fact that it can truly be a cross-section of so many people that come into traffic court. You might not get brought in because of something serious, but just about everybody's been in court because of something for traffic. The diversity in the folks that are coming in, especially in Newport News, was all across the board. And we used interpretation for people that needed to come in and have an interpreter. And I think that people got the message, but I got very upset with officers coming in and feeling like me taking the time to get an interpreter was unnecessary because, well, they seem to understand everything that I said on the street. So why do we have to get an interpreter? Oh, they speak English just fine. I don't think that we need an interpreter. And what I explained a couple of times, and then I didn't have to say it anymore, was anybody coming into a court system, if you go visit some other country officer and you are going into a court system, wouldn't you like to hear the information that they're going to share with you in your native tongue? So why is it a problem to make sure that you make it as comfortable as possible for someone who's coming into a scary situation? And I think that that's the part that we have to focus on, making these spaces that we navigate within so easily as lawyers or judges or whoever, comfortable for those who don't, and then comfortable for the new attorneys or other attorneys that are joining this space as well. I wanted to connect with every person that came into court. I ended up learning how to give the oath in Spanish just because there was one thing that I didn't want to have to say through an interpreter. And I want to be able to connect with you and know that I am here to help get this process done. But I also checked with someone who was a native speaker before I tried to do that so that I would in no way offend someone by trying to achieve this goal.
That's fine. That's fine. I'll go Duolingo. Duolingo. 536 days. I'm on it. But no, that's appreciated, and it was actually recognized by one of the commentators how you had gotten a interpreter before. But I want to pick up on one thing you said, and it's the overriding issue for me, and that is that the law enforcement officer was growing impatient when you were trying to get the interpreter. Maybe I'm reading too much behind that, but I don't think I am. That's the associate who's talking to a partner who controls their future, who's growing impatient because they don't understand why you have long braids. That's the client who is waiting for Karen, and they've ordered Chick-fil-A. And what do you mean you don't eat Chick-fil-A? Every red-blooded American eats Chick-fil-A, except for me. But so when that officer is growing impatient, I'm not asking you to opine on it, but I'm stating as the moderator, yeah, that scares me, because that's the very person who's going to pull me over, and they're making in the field decisions, and that's where we are.
And let me be clear, all of it wasn't about impatience, but for some people it was.
I get it.
And so taking the time to at that moment, I guess, use the platform, because you are a captive audience for me, to help them understand why it's important. Not to say, and you know, not to necessarily beat them over the head with you're wrong for thinking that someone isn't entitled to this, but helping you understand that if this were you and you were coming into a situation where the vocabulary is already tough for people who are native English speakers, why wouldn't you want to make sure that
What does created for you mean?
I'm sorry?
So what does created for you mean? Exactly, stop. Now, Yana, and this, I'm going to toss this right to Karen, and Rick, I want you to be thinking about this too. I think it's your thing. And I'm going to do it this way, Karen. There was a comment that just came in, and there was a question that came in earlier. So I'm going to merge these two things. The first comment, Karen, was that you'd used the phrase meet people where they are, which I think sounds just like what you and Rick talked about. And they want you to, they want us to talk about that a little bit more. So I want to start with you. And then in the question, and this person is anonymous, and if they look at the chat, we haven't hit anything. They said they get the response oftentimes, haven't we been through this before? Why don't, we get it, let's move on. That person's not saying they are that, that's it at all. He's asking, how do we integrate DEI concerns into the lifeblood of the community or into the firm so that inclusive actions become second nature? I think that question dovetails very nicely with what does it mean when you say meet people where they are?
So first of all, I wanted to clarify with the judge that the fact that somebody has good intentions doesn't make it right. So the fact that I might have good intentions when I want to find out everything about the Asian community, when I meet Rick, and it's his job to teach me and school me about everything. I might have good intentions, but it's not his job. And I hear all the time, I'm the only, Latino female in this organization, and I'm on every Latino committee that there is, because I don't want to be on all those committees. I want to be on the committee, for practice development or something else. So tapping your minority employees are exhausted because they're tapped in for everything. They're tapped for all the diversity. It's like, back off. Everyone owns diversity, not just your minority. They're not there to teach you. You need to own it yourself. So start with that. Meeting people where they are. There's a great video out there if you haven't seen it. Anybody that's been to Disney, who has been to Crystal Palace, knows that those Winnie the Pooh and all those characters come out, and their job is to go from table to table to table to table to table, get a picture, leave. And they're a second at each table because they got every table to do. And there's this great video out there of a person dressed in a Winnie the Pooh costume, and he sees a disabled child, an infant, who is severely disabled. And this video that the mom took is of this Winnie the Pooh standing with that child for minutes, just caressing the child, talking to the child. The child can't speak, the child is severely disabled, but met that family where they are. And I think that is the perfect example of seeing where you meet people where they are and understanding, like, what are the needs of each person that reports to me. Own that experience, because it could be different for each person, and understanding what people's goals and development is. I know when I was at McGuire Woods, I'm sure everyone thought I was like, loved litigation. I hated litigation. It wasn't my thing. And so understanding what people really enjoy and tapping into that and finding opportunities for them. I had a case recently of a Black male who claimed he was not given this promotion over a white male. They were similarly situated with respect to years of service, et cetera. And I asked, why didn't this man get this promotion? And I was told, oh, well, he didn't have multi-regional experience. The white man had multi-regional experience. And I said, well, how did he get that? He said, well, when this guy went out, he was tapped to do that other region. I said, so you set him up for success. You're the one that made it so that he's now ready for this promotion. What did you do for the Black male? Why didn't he have that opportunity? So you're creating the opportunity for this individual. So it's understanding and talking to each person to find out what they're interested in, and then finding those opportunities for that person. That's the individualization of meeting people where they are.
That's perfect. Rick, how do you expand that into the law firm world? How do you take that for real?
Well, it goes to, again, meeting people where they are. I used to do recruiting at law schools and bring them in and deal with, junior associates. And there was one time it was at a different firm, but I was talking to an African-American female, and this was for the Northern Virginia office, Tyson's office, and she was the only one that we had in our class, and would have been the only one it was another firm in the office at the time. And we were talking to her and wanted to make sure she felt like she was getting good work and had good mentors and was kind of adjusting in. And I remember the conversation with her vividly, because she was like, Rick, there's nobody else here. And I said, well, okay, we can do some things with DC. There's some more summer associates there. And she just looked me straight in the eyes, like, Rick, I'm not strong enough to be the first. And in some ways, she shouldn't have to be. Like you said, there's that one minority associate, they're on every single committee. And so at big firms, meeting people where they are applies, again, across the board. These are skills that apply to every firm, to every job, to every situation. And where the judge talks about, imagining, you're a person who doesn't speak complete English, and in a courtroom, hearing terms like rights and constitution and violation, those words, you want to meet them where they are, get somebody to explain. And here had an associate, or a summer associate, and she was just saying, I'm not comfortable here, and trying to like put myself in her spot and trying to figure out what to do. And it's like, well, but you're work doing with this person. Yeah, she's like, I like that person. It's great work, and that person's good. And ultimately, it was trying to do things more with the DC class, where she felt more comfortable and more integrated. But so everyone's different. I can't just say, well, somebody has to be first. And she said, and she remembers, she's like, I'm not built to be the first. I want to be with other people. And some other people, especially when you go back in time, where somebody was first. And these are amazing, powerful people who busted through barriers and did that. But we can't expect everybody to be that person, and it's unfair. So we do need to meet people where they are, whether it's, with here's a summer associate, and want to make sure that her needs are being met. And her needs were, she wanted to be with other people that she felt comfortable with. She didn't want to be the ground breaker. And she said it, and it was very emotional. She's like, I'm not that person. And so we're like, well, you need to do this, you're strong, you're smart, you went to Georgetown, and all these things, and kind of boost it through. But no, I needed to meet her where she was, which is, she needed support. She wanted support. And we as a firm would have failed her if we didn't give her that support. Gave her great work, or gave her great partners. But what she needed was people that she could connect with, and did. And not saying that everyone does, but that's what she needed.
Well, that's there's so many things I'm thinking when I hear you say that. Yeah, because I am the first Black partner with Rogers, and it's a great firm and great people, and I can affirmatively say I love them. But I can appreciate what you're saying, and I can appreciate that not everyone should have to be the first to be successful. There's a lot going on right there. There was a comment that was made, and it dovetails very nicely with it. And I'm not sure who I'm gonna toss this to. I'm asking about it to take it. It's delicate, but the comment was made to everyone that one of our attendees didn't want to feel like the token anymore. The token, and I know we all know what that means. How do you address that when you look around and you are the only one in the room, whatever that one is? Only disabled person, only person who might be gay or openly gay or Asian or Black. How do you help people get beyond feeling like they're tokens, and how do we make our firms recognize or the places we work recognize how important that is? That's a tough question, and I'm tossing it out there.
Well, I would say stop treating them like a token. So stop putting them on every committee. I know, when the George Floyd murder happened, and Black employees were like tapped into everything to fix all the problems in the organization, and they're exhausted. And so treat them like actual lawyers who are valued, and put them on the same committees that your white men are on. And so I think that's part of it as well. And in a discussion like this, sometimes I feel like people are on this call going, all y'all out there, y'all got to change. All y'all out there, you got to change. And they're not thinking, I have issues. Like every one of us has our own biases. And I did this training, unconscious bias training, for a school system, and predominantly people in the room were Black. And at the end, the superintendent said, y'all, we got to fix our stuff. We all have this. And I just loved, I don't know if you all saw the Stephen A. Smith, Stephen A. Smith is this ESPN or whatever commentator, and he's all about racial justice and, very into it. But yet when he was talking about the Otano baseball player, they asked him, is he the future of baseball? And he said, I don't think so, because he's not from America, and it's an American sport. And so you see, we all have a touch point, there's something there. We all got something. And I hope that we see that in ourselves. And when we do have people join our firm, there does have to be a first. And I don't know how to fix that necessarily, other than to just kind of acknowledge that we're trying to, when we hire people, that there is going to be an impression that this person's only hired because she's a woman. That, unfortunately, that's what people are going to say. And it didn't help people like Coca-Cola, their general counsel, who basically initially they removed it, told law firms, if you've got people working on our case, 50% have to be a minority and so many percentage have to be Black. So if I'm a Black associate, I'm thinking, well, of course, the only reason I'm on here is to meet their quota. And well, I want to work on this other case where I can develop business. So those programs that are well-meaning actually perpetuate the negativity of the token or affirmative action or things like that. And we have to get away from that, because I think it is so unfortunate when I see these amazing people in their jobs and there's this false narrative that they're only there because of affirmative action, or they're only there because they're a token. And that to me is the worst possible solution to all of this, is this theory that you're only there because of X.
Yeah, and listen, that's some delicate stuff. And Judge Flythe, I want to hear you talk about tokenism, but I want to address this bigger concept. And you might be familiar with the Coca-Cola people. I happen to know the general counsel who put that rule in place. And what he was trying to address was the greater ill of massive law firms getting all this work, and these people who are not represented, not getting the exposure on those cases. And when you're inside of a firm, that's one of the big deals. And you're right, it may very well be that I don't want to work on Coca-Cola's case. But I'll tell you, if Coke was a client of ours, I'd want to have a Coca-Cola case. Not that I just like Diet Coke, because I do, but that's a massive, massive global organization. I may find myself over in Russia or somewhere selling Diet Coke, which is cool too. So I get, Karen, that's not to disagree with you. I agree with you 100%. Quotas and those things are only court ordered. Those are things that should only come into play when you have a history of systemic discrimination. But what we also know is when you're the client and you have dollars, you can make some demands that it's sort of like the Rooney Rule. And you guys are familiar with the Rooney Rule in football, since you mentioned Stephen A. Smith. The Rooney Rule was established by the Rooney family who owned the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm going to bastardize it terribly, but the Rooney Rule said in an NFL, you have to interview at least one minority candidate for the particular head coaching job or coordinating job you have. And the idea behind the Rooney Rule was not that you would always hire that person, though the Steelers did hire one of Virginia's own, and I mean the Commonwealth, right? Because what you did was you gave them experience and exposure to what that interview process was like. So maybe you failed 3, 4, 5, 6 times, but before the Rooney Rule, people weren't even getting the interviews. And so it is a delicate thing to try to fight what you see as a systemic problem like Coca-Cola is trying to do, but not create the tokenism that is really the real concern. Judge Flythe, what do you think about that?
It's hard to be the first in any room. And I know that, that's still happening. In Virginia, the judgeships that just happened over the last session, represented probably one of the most diverse classes in the judiciary that we have seen in ever. And so a lot of the people in that room that I was sharing that room with, they were representing the first in that space. And there's always going to be a necessity for that. One of the things that you can do to stop the solitude is to make sure that you continue and not feel like having a person is the goal, but having a diverse office or having a diverse organization is the goal. And that should never stop. I know that it is, I hear what you're speaking about as far as having things in place that encourage you to look for that talent. And I think that really what has to happen is that people have to understand, or organizations have to understand, that they're enriched by diversity. So it's not just about ticking a box or bringing someone into a place where they necessarily have to feel some solitude. There are going to be things that I might not share all of the same interests. I just learned how to play a little bit of golf. And if all of the people that I sit down to the table with are males that don't necessarily look like me, or maybe they do look like me, some of them, and they all play golf and they're talking about those things, or maybe they're talking about sports or whatever. Not that I don't like sports. Sometimes it is harder. You feel like an outsider. You're sitting at the table over in your own little section here. And a lot of times I think that women have just learned to deal with that. Black people have just learned to deal with the fact that I know that sometimes I'm going to be the only person in the room. And sometimes it does take a level of strength. And I think that it takes pulling on some of that you might have historically. As you know, I still come from people who are folks that will pull themselves up, and they've been through stuff that is way worse than this. And if what I have to do is sit in this room to blaze a trail for the next person that comes and then mentor the next person that comes, it literally becomes my commitment to my community to stay the course and then also help the next person. But the people who are doing the recruiting, I think, do need to make sure that it's not about let's get one. You know, it's about let's diversify. Let's change the narrative and be enriched by differences.
That tells this question very nicely. Karen, I'm gonna come to you next. And I'm looking at this question that was just asked, and it moved because somebody else wrote something down. Oh, I see. We had the question in the Q&A box about how do we make this second nature? And then the question here is, you know, how do you train to make something second nature? And I know you do that for a living. And then, you know, the comment is, or question is, but if what Coca-Cola did is a distraction from the process, because we know quotas are dangerous animals, they are dangerous animals for sure. Where is the effective balance? So how do we train first to make it second nature?
Well, I would hate to think I was hired because the company had a gun to their head. And I think that that is so demeaning to anyone who feels that they deserve this opportunity. And I hope that what organizations should do, what you should do is put into place in your system from the very beginning, from posting your job description. There was this case, my daughter's baseball coach is a Black male who was one of the first NCAA, whatever, he's a catcher at a university in Virginia, amazing person. It's just awesome. So this job opened up in Virginia for a baseball coach at one of the universities, his university where he went. He applied for that job to be the baseball coach. And they immediately rejected him. One of the criteria is 2 years college coaching experience. I'm like, how many Black coaches out there have 2 years of college coaching experience? They don't. If that's your criteria, you're automatically excluding a Black candidate. And so what do you have in your job description? I had another client, they were having trouble hiring diverse talent. And so they had one of 2 certificates that this person had to have. And somebody suggested, well, why don't we add a third potential certificate, which would be just as good. And now we can have one of 3 certificates. And somebody said, oh, well, I'll let everybody know that we're lowering the job standards. And the person said, no, we're expanding the job opportunities. And so it's shifting every aspect of our life cycle. If you're a manager, from when we're hiring people in the job description, how we're paying people, can we justify their pay? You know, I had a case of an unequal pay where the man worked at a firm and the woman had worked at legal aid, and they both now go to this organization, and the man's making way up here and she's making way down here. And they said, well, it's because we had to base it on what the salary was before they came here. I said, but she's a rock star. She's doing the exact same job as this man. Why is she not making what he is making? So it's every aspect of your life cycle of the employee's experience. You're thinking about it every time for everybody. It's not that we're excluding white men. They play in the space too. We need everyone to feel a sense of belonging. And we can do that by giving people a sense of belonging. When you're in a meeting, give people the air in the room. Tap on them for the important decisions. Those are the things that we can be doing. Remember, it's local, not up to everybody else. What are you going to do? And I hope that people walk away not thinking, what's my organization going to do about this? No, what are you going to do about this? That's what I would ask, because that's what you can control, what you do about it.
Rick, you're one man, you're on an island with this large firm background. How do you start this conversation or continue the conversation and improve it? If Coca-Cola is wrong, how do we change a mindset and create an underpinning?
Coca-Cola is maybe the way they came about it wasn't the best way to do it. But the idea is important because, you know, at some point we get to the point where it's like, you know, listen, People were the first in the 70s, the first women in my law school. I remember that they have something set up for the first woman who graduated in the 70s from Notre Dame Law School. It's a big deal. But then there's talk about the pipeline. Well, okay, we don't have as many women because there haven't been as many women graduating from law schools historically, or minorities. And at some point, the pipeline is there, and people are graduating at X numbers. But then, who's making partner? Who's being promoted? So, we can talk about a lot of good ideas and a lot of good efforts, but at some point, metrics. And again, you don't want nobody wants any hard numbers or set asides or anything like that. But you do need to look at the numbers, because if at the end of the day you've gotten a good pool of associates and who made it from law school, good pool there, a good pool of associates, but the numbers aren't making it through partners or making it through equity or making it through leadership, then that's a warning sign. What are we missing? Is it like you said? Well, one of the criteria is you have to have 2 years of coaching in college football. Previously, well, nobody was. So it requires it. And diversity. The beauty of that is it brings different perspectives. It's not that I'm a black football coach, but it's like, hey, you have a different group of people. They can say, do you see that criteria there? Here's how it actually could affect things. I mean, diversity isn't, you need everybody. It's the, guess what? It is a better product when different people with different life experiences and different backgrounds look at something, because they're going to bring something with that. And you talk about going into a courtroom and people being there. One of the moments I remember as when I worked for a judge, a circuit court judge in Fairfax, Irish guy, as a kid had red hairs and freckles. And I remember talking to him once in the courtroom, and there was a ceremonial courtroom with a lot of beautiful portraits of the previous judges there. And it's like, oh, I was told we can put these up. Would you like me to set, get some of these in your courtroom? Other judges have some different things in the ceremonial courtroom. And he said, Rick, imagine you're a minority coming in here for criminal sentencing. And you look up and you see a bunch of portraits of old dead white people. And it's like, part of this is the judge. He said, part of my job is making people feel that they were heard, that when they were being sentenced, that, I was looking at all the factors. And it really is about making sure that they felt that they had a fair day in court. And having that, he's like, it doesn't add to it. And I get it, and there's no problem with other people do have, but really it's about putting yourself in that person's spot. And I remember hearing, I think it was Judge Lee, but he was telling me that there was some judicial program where they had judges walk into a room and everybody was a minority. The jurors were all minority, the judge was a minority, the deputy, just so that people could kind of walk in and say, wow, I'm about to be judged by a bunch of people who don't look like me, just to open up their eyes. I mean, the key in all this is just being cognizant of how other people feel in that situation. There's no magic bullet, you don't have to study up on different cultures, Mayan, Chinese, Vietnamese, and African. No, it's just about being open and just putting yourself in their spot. Imagine walking into a courtroom. And when he said that, it was like, imagine being sentenced. Do you think, he's like, no matter how much work I did, do you think that there's a chance that somebody could say, I didn't have a fair shake because here's an Irish judge with a bunch of white portraits around me, and no matter what I do, Rick, he's like, they're gonna feel like I didn't sentence them appropriately. And that to me was like, wow, my first taste of it. So, and I think pointing to him, I mean, we talk about diversity. This isn't a minority problem. This isn't things that everyone needs to do. And whether your background, you're white, you're Hispanic, you're Black, you're Asian, and it's funny, I do have some colleagues and I talk to them and they're like, Rick, I get it. I think, we're talking about juries, and he's like, I will never get picked on a jury. And I'm like, because he's like white male, he's like, everyone's going to think I'm going to be pro cop. And he is the most skeptical. He's like, I would be an amazing person for the defense, because he's like, I will hold them to that standard. But he's like, I will never get picked. And those are the allies. These are the people, this isn't in preparation for this, I was talking to some people, including groundbreaking people at my firm, and asking them for ideas and thoughts. And one of the people I talked to, she was like, Rick, when this firm set up diversity, one of the things we wanted to make sure was this wasn't a minority problem, that it wasn't the diversity committee was going to be headed by, me, I was going to be the leader, I was going to be on everything like that. She's like, I wanted the chairman. The chairman is going to head the diversity meeting because it's everybody's issue. And it's so easy to say, well, this is, have affinity groups, and, like the McGuire Woods has a lot of affinity groups. I'm part of the Asian lawyer network there. Like, oh, the affinity groups will take care of it. No, it's not. We want the chairman there. We want, the president of the firm an active part of this, because everyone has to participate. It's not, oh, well, yeah, well, there's a lot of minorities, and we'll affinity group, and when at the partners retreat, they'll all get together. No. This is everybody's problem, and at the same time, it's everyone's solution.
Yeah, points well made. I'm thinking back to something, and I'd like to give people some ideas of what to do. The young lady who came in, it strikes me that what you need to do, if you don't have it internally, you need to find external resources that they may be able to communicate with. I mean, I could imagine no better mentor relationship than being able to call a Judge Flythe or someone and say, look, I've got this young lady. I don't want her to be first. She don't want to be first, but I got her here. And I want her to find somebody she's comfortable speaking to. And I don't mean it has to be a Black woman talk to a Black woman, but I mean a person of consequence and substance who can sit in that role. And it may very well be that, I hate to say this because now I'm stereotyping, but a younger person may want to at least see someone who looks like them, who's been successful, and then they can branch out. I think that's sort of meeting people where they are. At least I feel like that's what that is. And if I'm not, then correct me now, because I don't want our attendees to leave with the stupid idea that the moderator said, and my great panelists could say otherwise. Judge Flythe, what do you think about that?
I think that first of all, I say call me. So if any of our 82 friends need that, to have that conversation, or have someone have that conversation, whether it's because they're a woman of color or just a woman in general, or someone that has other factors, as Karen brought up. I won't call it a barrier, but for a time I was a single mom, and I know what it's like to try and break into this. I know what it's like to have a young child early and still try to do these things. So call me. That's the first thing that I'll say. And I do think that that's important. I think that all of us have to avail ourselves to be mentors as well. Does that add an extra responsibility for people who do bring that diversity on top of everything else that you need to do? You have to avail yourself to be a mentor. And yes, that's just the truth. You just have to. And I think that so many of us are willing to, because we know what it's like to have to get outside resources, because there isn't someone that you can just say, go into their office and say, you know what, I feel like I'm offended by this, but I might be overreacting, or I think that the person just said something and I'm a little uncomfortable with what they said. I don't know how to approach it. I mean, sometimes it's just, it's important to have a door open where you can do that. So for firms or for any organizations, if you do have someone that is the first, I think that what Victor is saying is completely accurate. Get some outside resources for them so that they can have someone to talk to. Going back to what was said about how do we start, I think that Rick was saying that the pipeline is starting to be here, but it still needs to continue to have fresh blood, if you will, flowing through it. Don't worry, Karen, I'm vegan too, so I understand that was all about something else.
How did I get a panel with two vegans? Rick, please tell me
around it for over a decade, but it's okay. My husband, he eats meat, and
the sad part is I was just thinking how healthy the two of you looking at me, thinking, okay, maybe a little more vegetables. And I love it. All right, keep going, Judge.
But I think that it's important to start as young as you think that you need to start younger. One of the programs that I am so blessed to be a part of is something that a young female attorney at the Commonwealth's office, she is a woman of color, started in Newport News. It's a STARS program. We identify a school in the community. We partner with the principal, partner with the guidance counselor, not to identify the chosen few that you know are absolutely going to have opportunities when they leave, but to identify kids that are hard workers but may not always have access. Maybe their interaction with the justice system is hard because they might even have a family member that has gone the hard way, right? And I think that what we do is we give them an opportunity to come in. We bring them all in. The objective is for them to do a case. They're going to do a case from start to finish. We don't pick a little wimpy case. We pick a homicide case, which is sadly something that they've been touched by a lot of times in their community or in our community. And but during the course of that time, lawyers and judges are talking to these kids from the fall all the way to the spring. We're mentoring them. They get to rub shoulders with us. They eat pizza with us. They are having conversations with us. And instead of the inside of a courtroom representing something that may have taken a parent away, or may have put a brother in custody, or may have affected them because they're in the juvenile system or we're in the juvenile system, it becomes a way to have a conversation where they can say, this is a possibility for me too. There's somebody in this room that looks like me, and somebody in this room that's willing to have a conversation with me and see me. And all of a sudden, we become humans and the system becomes more accessible. It doesn't become something that's just about oppressing them. It becomes something that they can be a part of and want to be a part of. So starting as young as possible to pique interest and to remind ourselves that it is our duty to be mentors. And that's for allies as well. If you become an ally, then be a mentor.
Wow, that's powerful. I have to dovetail there. We've got about 10 minutes, give or take, actually 8. And there's a question that came in that flows very nicely with what you just said, because we're talking about different people. But I'm going to make a plug here. It's a shameless plug. It's just a statement of fact. The VBA can offer you those social interactions with people as students and the like. It is an awesome organization. It's one that needs work and can be improved, but you are the very people to improve it. And it's the people who are not here that I need to see here to improve it. That question dovetails very nicely too, and I'll share this personal anecdote, and I won't talk any more than that, because you talked about people who need to see how the system can work, and I'm talking about the larger societal system. The question here, and Karen, I want you to ponder this question as I say what I'm about to say, is how do you address this to staffing? Because there's a different power distinction between staff and attorneys, for example. But I'm going to bring it back to something the judge just said. I'm going to make it very personal, and I will share this with you. I have a son who is 19 years old, who is running track at Bridgewater College in Bridgewater, Virginia. I'm so proud I could burst. My son went to the summer meeting last year, and at that time he was coming off of COVID, so he took a COVID gap year, and I don't think he'd be horrified if I was telling this story to 85 of my friends, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I'm so proud of him. He went to Bridgewater College, but before he went, he came to the VBA summer meeting. And when he went to the VBA summer meeting, I'm going to tell you unequivocally that in our 133 years, fast approaching 134, he clearly was the first person who'd ever been to the VBA meeting, period. And then as a young Black male, 19, too, with straight pink hair. I mean, the picture behind Karen's pink does it no justice. He had pink hair. But what was amazing about him as he was struggling to figure out what was going on and who he wanted to be is how he was embraced by these allies. Not because anybody saw it, but because they just thought this was a handsome young man and they spoke to him. And I will tell you, the thing that was most telling was the 60-some-year-old, 70-year-old white woman who came up to him during the black tie banquet. We had to go buy him a tux because he hadn't really packed right, and showed him the lock of pink hair she had coming in her hair under her ear, like you have long hair like Karen's. And that moment, it was clear to me that was the Winnie the Pooh character. That was the person who was taking time to meet him exactly where he was. And I'm going to tell you that was a seismic change in the way my son views the world and the way he says, so I can really be a lawyer too. Dude, I've only been one for 30 years. Oh, hell yes, you can. But now he believes it. And that's where DEI comes to play. Karen, how do we address this power differential in other situations?
Well, what I want people to know is that I've done pretty well in my 30-year career. I think I'm doing pretty well. And it's because of white men. Not a single woman that I worked with in my entire career did a darn thing for my career. Not one. In fact, they worked against my career. All the women I reported to, they were nasty and mean and vile and toxic and awful. White men is the reason that I am successful, because those white men took me under their wing. I write in my book about Tom Farrell, who I would see in the water cooler, and we'd chat about coffee and Coffee Mate and whatever. And he had this big case that he was working on. He was looking for someone to help with discovery, and he tapped me. I didn't even work with him directly. He tapped me for that. And that experience allowed me to have exposure in the firm to other important people, important cases. And then that leads to other things. We need allies in a way that not just for other women, like in my case, but all of us need to see that we can do better. And I think with this remote environment, it has been awful for those kinds of things. We have got to understand that there are people that are not being seen because they're out of sight, out of mind. And I worry about that, because I am telling you, the reason I have been successful is because of meeting people randomly in the office and them tapping me. And I am so grateful to all of them. And we need more allies. That's what we need, for people to see, where can I branch out and find opportunity for other people.
That is outstanding. Rick, we have about 3 minutes, and I want Judge Flythe to have the next to last word, the penultimate word, as I'm going to have it. So Rick, just give us a quick summary of your thoughts.
Quick, so just to build off that, and you know, in a perfect world, we would be able to help people in various groups, but you know, it's funny. I was talking to somebody, and at the end of the day, finding allies, you know, in a perfect world, you'd have a large number of, you know, African American partners to choose from, or a large number of Asians or Hispanics. At the end of the day, I think both sides, the people who are coming up and the people who are established, you know, going out of your comfort zone just a little bit. You know, you're coming up. You know, maybe you want a certain type of people to help you. If you're a woman, you want a mentor, or, you know, preferably, you know, the strongest person or with the biggest book of business. But you know, going outside your comfort zone and talk to somebody at the water cooler, as Karen said, and same with established partners or people in power. You know, look for somebody. Yeah, they always say, "Oh, I like that person. They remind me of me." Well, they remind you of you, and it's an Asian woman, and you're not. And so, you know, I think if we can go out of our comfort zone, both sides, I think it would be a step in the right direction.
Judge Flythe, just a few comments.
I will just say, one, I thank you all so much. I have enjoyed being a part of this, and I appreciate it. And the conversations need to keep happening. One of the things that you'll see in the PowerPoint is about fatigue around this issue. And I would just encourage people that it is our duty. We are a self-policed profession, which means it's our duty to continue to uplift and to firm up the integrity of what we do in this profession. Integrity doesn't just mean honesty, it means also this moral uprightness. And I think that we all can agree that it is something that is an increase and a beauty in our values to make sure that we're embracing and bringing in the differences, because we want to make sure that this system, this world works for as many people as it can. And we represent a diverse country and a diverse state. And how beautiful is it to have a system that can speak to all of those folks as well.
Let me say unequivocally that this conversation will have to continue. Let me implore all of you to become more involved with the VBA over the coming weeks, months, and years, because it is the organization in the Commonwealth where we can bring all this together. And we do have to bring together. I can't thank you guys enough for letting me just be part of this. There is more to come, but right now I see President Ottinger has shown his face, and I see, according to my computer clock, it's 4:15, which means our timing is impeccable. I'm about to say something really bad. I'm gonna say it anyway. Yes, Black people can stop on time if we have to. Sorry. Cut me right there. Richard.
Victor, thank you so much. Thank the panel so much. What a fantastic way to end the annual meeting, the CLE portion of the annual meeting. Just a great program. And I saw so many chats from folks saying, we have got to either take this on the road, we've got to continue it at the summer meeting. Couldn't agree more. So stay tuned, panel members. You're going to get the ask soon.
Yes, you will.
So thank you, everybody. This is the end of our programming, the CLE programming today. Many thanks for all of you who attended. And thank you again to our sponsors who are Atwell, Troxel, and Lay PC, Dominion Energy, Land and Law Group, the McCammon Group, VBA Insurance and Benefinder, VBA Practice Management Advisor, Van Dievener Black LLP, and Woods Rogers PLC. We will see you in 14 minutes for the VBA business meeting. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone.
Please come.